Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
It's going great. Who are we talking to today?
Well, if you remember my Young, he has connected us with one of his buddies called Eric Junge up in Seattle. And this guy is not only a music educator, he's classically trained in keys, he's a drummer, and he's also into synths. So I'm actually really looking forward to talking to this guy.
And I hear he's got a little bit of a YouTube channel. So let's
Correct.
get to it.
Mike's on mics. Yeah.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, how are you doing? Good to be
Good.
here.
I'm Mike Nimocks.
And I'm Mike Dow.
Hello, Mikes.
Yes. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome. So you've been doing this, it looks like, for about 30 years. And
Yes, I'm 85 years old. No, but
how did you first come to music and to do what you're doing?
just piano lessons when I was a kid. Like my mom just took me to piano lessons when I was 5 or 6.
Were your parents musical themselves?
I didn't really come from a musical family, so to speak, but I think they were like enthusiastic about music, but not necessarily musically trained or any of that.
Music consumers
Probably, yeah, that's probably it.
wanted to get you out of the house.
Yeah, I think they just saw something in me and they were like, let's get them in some piano lessons and see what happens. Because I was reading pretty early and stuff. So, and then it all went downhill later, but we can get into that too.
So how long did piano lessons last? Did you keep with that or did you migrate on to other things?
Yeah, so like looking back, I think I struggled because I didn't want to practice, believe it or not.
Really?
So
Shocker.
yeah, I just didn't want to
So weird.
practice, although I still did it and begrudgingly, and it was probably a pretty big point of contention in my
It
household.
usually is.
Yeah, I managed to stick it out for like a good 6 or 7 years, the piano thing. And by that time, I was hitting my rebellious, teenage years where I wanted to quit piano and take up guitar and all that. So I basically just started kind of my own musical journey without any sort of lessons or formal guidance around 12 or 13. One of my best friends was a guitar player. He was doing, lessons. And so he kind of started showing me some stuff. And then basically with what I'd already kind of picked up from piano training, I could kind of pick up guitar and start like learning it on my own, which was fun. That was a really fun process, and started some bands in my basement, my household basement, and started jamming out with other kids around the neighborhood and my friends, obviously. And then somebody left a drum set over, so I had to start learning drums, and yeah, just kind of just went on from there. But ended up sticking with drums for pretty seriously, as like I'm a drum teacher now, so that was a pretty fruitful adventure, I'd say, having the drums left over at my place. And my parents didn't complain about the noise, so thank you.
I think that actually has a lot to do with it. I also had drums left at our house, and I also played very late into the night, and I guess luckily the house was fairly large or big enough that they didn't care, or maybe they were getting so old that they couldn't hear me as much. I know the rest of my brothers and sisters probably had a little bit of a problem. I didn't know that until recently when my sisters and siblings would say things like, "You kept playing those damn drums." And I was like, "Oh, yeah. I didn't know that I was bugging you. Sorry." But yeah, you get left with something and you're like, "I kind of want to be a drummer. What's this like? Let's see if we can learn things." But the encouragement of no discouragement, it wasn't like, "Hey, keep playing those drums. We really like it at midnight." But the idea that they don't come in and say, "Shut the hell up.
Exactly.
We're trying to sleep."
That was kind of what was going on, I think, at my house too. And then they would just let kids come over and wail on amplifiers. So pretty fortunate, I think, looking back on it. I was able to get that going.
Yeah, the more I think about it and remember my own journey, I think about things like, wow, how fortunate was it for me to, first of all, have this opportunity to have, you know, a nice, loving home, but also to have all these things that it's not normal, you know, it's not the reg for a lot of folks. And so I am thankful for a lot of those things, but and to the point that I was spoiled to a point. Like you said, oh, I want a guitar, right? And I remember thinking my for one Christmas, my dad bought me a brand new Fender Strat and an amp. And I was like,
nice.
I wanted an Emax too, Dad, a sampler. I thought I made that clear. What the hell am I going to do with this guitar? I mean, what a spoiled way to receive a gift. But honestly, it was the smartest thing he ever could have done, because writing songs with guitar is way different. In some ways, it's a lot easier to kind of finger those chords and go through it. I don't know if you find it to be the same, but I remember being very thankful later going, oh, I shouldn't have been such a dick.
Yeah, I think I wrote some of my first songs I ever wrote were probably on guitar, because I didn't really write music on piano much. But yeah, I do now. So that's fun.
So in those early bands, what was kind of the first one that stuck, so to speak, where you actually did some performances, whether that's a talent show or something else?
Yeah. So I think I did a punk band that lasted for like a month or two. And then
What was that called?
broke. Plan B. Not very original, but and then after that, then that kind of spawned like a pretty long withstanding band called Vermilion that we went into our teen years, kind of like through high school, and then graduated high school, had some lineup changes, and we ended up taking that band on tour and doing some pretty notable things with it, releasing vinyl records and that kind of thing.
Wow.
Into my early 20s when that finally disbanded. But well, I think that band actually started before I was in it, but then it kind of sprouted in probably the time I came into it, into the more advanced stages, if you will, of playing music and releasing it.
So what were you playing in these bands? Guitar?
Yeah, no, like in the punk band, I did guitar, and then that's when the drums were left. So after that, I pretty much was just doing drums. So, because nobody could play drums in high school, there was like 3 of us. So I just was like, now I play drums, so that's cool. And I mean, I still played around with guitar, but I was kind of just playing drums in Vermilion and keeping the band going there. And yeah, I kind of was like, I not give up on piano, but it took a serious hiatus for sure.
Typically, the people I know who play drums or keyboard or both, they end up being the more technically savvy of the band. Say you're in a band, there's one person in there who's like, well, I know how to wire, plug in and work the mixer and the recorder and stuff. And the drummers are usually like, yeah, that's me, because I need so many channels to get my stuff either recorded or heard. Is that what happened to you?
To be honest, I kind of was successful in steering clear of all the technical stuff up until several years ago. And now I know way more about that stuff than I ever did kind of coming up, which I really kind of regret not getting into it sooner. I was always fortunate enough to have like somebody else take care of that kind of stuff, like the recording side. And, we kind of paid studios. That was kind of back when it was a little more affordable. It's pretty crazy now, but I remember my friend who played guitar, his name was Eric too. His dad came over to our basement and like set up a 8-track, something kind of old school. It was the 90s, probably. Yeah. And he recorded us in my parents' basement. His dad did. And that was pretty fun.
I'm gonna describe it and see if I can guess which one it was. Was it kind of a black face 3 RU unit and maybe had some green LED meters and whatnot on it?
Or most likely, I couldn't tell you.
There's really two. There's that one and there's a tan one, which was sort of Tascam's version of it. So,
well, I think it was a digital recorder, but that's all I remember. I actually had a Tascam like 4-track that I bought somewhere, maybe Guitar Center,
yes,
or like a local music store.
You throw the cassette in there, yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of demos on that, especially in that punk band I was playing in, where I sang and played guitar. Unfortunately, I think I got rid of that in the last 5 or 10 years, and now I regret that too.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, why do you regret that? Just because of the nostalgia?
Yeah, I took a lo-fi turn into electronic music, and I was like thinking, man, I could just, instead of going DAW, I could just go into this 4-track and do a release, just keep it really simple.
Yeah, there's something to be said by the forced creativity, I'm going to say, of having 4 tracks and having to plan that out and, do whatever you're going to do, especially if you're adding a vocal part or a guitar part or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So very cool.
It's a little romantical to like just be like, oh, I did something on a 4-track,
Yeah.
And it sounds okay, not going to sound amazing, obviously, but
well, and nostalgic, I mean, I think the technical is the highs are going to be rolled off a little bit more than something that you've recorded digitally. You're going to get a little wow and flutter in there and some noise and, the things that kind of people like about vinyl. And
sure,
I've seen a couple of YouTube videos where somebody's like, you know what? I'm not doing this digital. We're firing up the old Tascam Porta Studio. And they make it work, and you start bouncing tracks and running into all the problems that you used to run into and like make it work. And you're like, yeah, that sounds like it was recorded on a Porta Studio.
Yeah, well, sometimes having that limited interface can just help you make more disciplined songwriting choices like on the spot. You're just like, well, I can't spend 2 months surgically manipulating the drums via MIDI, so I guess I'll just go with this one loop for 3 minutes.
I want to roll it back a little bit from the punk band. I mean, clearly there are synths around you. I don't know, is that an MS-1 behind you there? What is that?
This is my I call it the Behringer collection.
Okay. That's it. It's Mike Dow. That's, if it's an MS-1, that's kind of the Behringer clone of the Roland SH101.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Does it have the hand thing too?
It did come with it. I never put it on. Never connected it all, but I still have. Obviously, I have it.
Okay. What's the hand thing? I don't know.
It makes it kind of like a keytar.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's like a makeshift keytar situation. It's kind of fun.
So from the punk band and getting into drumming, eventually you got into where my heart is, the synth world. And, like I'm saying, you're sitting there and there's stuff behind you and you finally got into the, pro audio technical side of it. How did that happen?
It's funny you ask, because I actually, when I was in my 20s and still a pretty serious drummer, I attempted to acquire a synthesizer, not like a nice one at all, but it was some kind of, I don't know, low end, probably equivalent to something like a SH101, where you kind of needed some knowledge to even just to get it to make a squawk, and I tinkered around with that thing for a couple days and could not for the life of me figure out what to do with it, so I didn't end up keeping it. And then fast forward 10, 12 years later, I started playing kind of more cover type of music. And I was already pretty good at keys because I was pretty classically trained. And then a lot of these cover songs require, classic analog sounds. And so I got this Korg Kross here, which can kind of model all that stuff. It's still pretty budget level. It's not like high end at all. But I mean, the analog modeling stuff is pretty acceptable, I'd say. So I just kind of started learning synthesis, and then I think I kind of really sunk my teeth into it during lockdown because I didn't have that much going on, and started getting gear acquisition syndrome on a low level. You know, I
don't know what you're talking about. I've never had that before in my life.
I have a small means of which to acquire gear. But as you can see with the Behringer collection here, you know, I don't have $3,000 synthesizers or anything, but it doesn't matter these days. You don't really need it. So, and you can get free software synths if you use those. They sound pretty good too.
Yeah, they do. We both have the affliction of, gosh, gee, that looks real nice and probably sounds very cool, and I need to play with that. And should I eat or play synthesizers?
It's called the synth diet.
Yeah, keeps you looking young and healthy.
So you don't remember that very, very first?
I wish I could. I think it was like a some kind of Casio, but it wasn't like those like chintzy ones that are kind of neat actually. But it was something that was like stepping into like a programming kind of thing. I just can't remember. Those were days were a little blurry too, for other reasons. But
no, that's okay.
Yeah.
So the next kind of big first one was the Korg Kross.
Yeah, well, I got that, and I actually got another one because I was trying seriously to join this band. I got like a Roland VR synth that has a lot of that kind of stuff on it too. It actually has like if you get underneath the hood of it, you can start programming sounds and stuff like that too. It's just not quite as hands-on as like the Kross or even these like Behringer synths. But yeah, I just kind of got the bug through that and like trying to match the sounds from the classic recordings and learning about the different waveforms and the different, you know, the filter and all the different aspects of synthesis. And
I found that to be pretty helpful trying to cover somebody else's song, you know, break down all the parts and recreate the sounds and put them back together and then be like, oh, okay. Because it's just, I think that even with a regular song, you know, breaking it down, it's like, oh, a lot of simple things that interweave to make this complex thing, which sounds more than the sum of its parts. Do you remember
for sure
any kind of covers that you were doing?
Yeah, well, I was obsessed with Africa, getting that like polyphonic brass sound.
Yes.
And I'm trying to think of another one I spent a long time on. Actually, there's this this song called Fox on the Run. It has this weird like opening synth sound that I focused on that for a while.
So are those some songs that you maybe tried to sequence to kind of figure out if you could do it?
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, I just had to kind of I had to kind of recreate some of those sounds from nothing.
Right.
Via the like tools and the synthesizers that I had.
I see.
And I don't know. I think they came out fine. They came out pretty close. I mean, not exact, obviously, but the brass stuff, it's easier to come across those because they're more in the presets, but it's still not exactly the subtler attributes of that particular sound. It's not really preset.
Well, and also, you know, when you're first into it or are kind of novice and your ears aren't as trained, one of the things that I found is when I first came across something like the brass sound in my favorite song at the time was You Can Call Me Out by Paul Simon.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wow, man, how do I get that sound? Oh, well, it's a synthesizer with a real brass section. So
interesting.
Yeah, like at the end of the song, it's like, oh, that's real brass, definitely. And so they just are mixing those two together. But yeah, so sometimes, and I found that also in some of Howard Jones's stuff. It's kind of like, oh, okay, you sprung for the real brass section there to double your synth brass. Okay, just fatten it all up.
I feel like that might be going on in Rosanna by
Yeah.
Toto,
Yeah.
probably in that
Yep.
horn thing.
Oh, sure.
There are some big producers of that day that it's probably the same brass guys on all those, where they come in with the synth horns and they're like, I know what you're trying to do, and this is the way it's actually going to sound good and not be jarring. Is hey, we're gonna layer some real brass on top, and everybody's like, oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, there used to be a synth, or no, brass horn section back then called, I think they were called Tower of Power, and
Oh yeah, those guys are awesome.
Yeah, I think they played on a lot of albums to make
Really
that
good
possible.
drummer for that band, David Garibaldi.
Mm-hmm.
I've studied a lot of his different grooves and things.
Yeah,
very familiar with them.
In that same kind of vein, I really, this is going to make me sound like I know more about drumming than I do, or drummers. But Dave Weckl had an album or two with a bunch of brass that was fun to listen to. Very fun.
That's a very notable name in drumming for sure. I guess I don't know where my story left, but here I am now, twiddling around.
You were
synths.
punk to synth. When you were first doing sequencing, was that on a? I don't know if the Korg Kross has a built-in sequencer or not. Was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I wrote some of my first electronic songs on the actual sequencer on this keyboard, which was super hard compared to like a DAW.
Right.
But I was just kind of like enamored with it, and I was like, oh, I just came up with this part, and now I'll come up with this part, and just kind of ABCing it together.
Yeah.
And then you realize the like limitations as you're going. You're like, oh, I guess that's permanent now.
And then clearly you got a computer one day and got, was it Cakewalk? Or
I actually screwed around with I messed around with Pro Tools for a minute, but then I got into Reaper because, again, I like to do things on a budget, and that one's more affordable. So I'm kind of a Reaper guy these days.
You're the
Lots
second
of
person
Reaper.
I've heard talking about that. I am unfamiliar with Reaper, but it's a DAW that is. I think there's a free version, if I'm not mistaken, and then there's.
Yeah. You can get like a free trial of it, and then like you can just get a license for I think $60. It's pretty affordable.
That's cool.
And that's what you're still on?
Yeah, I'm still
Cool.
on it, and I don't have any issues with it. I really like it. So
Whoever makes Reaper, are they still around and supporting it and putting out new stuff?
yeah, I think it's like I can't remember, but it could be like considered like open source. Is that a thing?
Oh, it's kind of like
Yeah.
the GIMP of the DAW world.
I think I think that's it. Mhm.
Okay. No, I have to look into it because I am zero educated about it. So I've heard of it,
Same.
but I was started out on Cakewalk, and then I've been in Cubase forever. I had a foray into the Reason sequencer, and then it's just I've stuck with what I know type deal. And I've heard of Reaper, but I've never gone out
Sure.
and checked it out and explored it. So, but everybody that has loves it. So
It has some limitations, and it doesn't really have like built-in instruments too much. Like Logic and stuff kind of excels at that, I guess. But if you're just like doing what I'm doing, I'm just kind of recording everything hardware anyways. I don't really use virtual instruments at all, at least not right now.
So where do you stand on that? Because some people feel very much against it, or the people that we've talked to, and then there's some people who are very much for virtual, and then there's some people who are in between. And I'll preface
I'm in
that.
between.
Okay.
I'm in between.
What are the reasons why you would or wouldn't use it?
Well, again, with having kind of low level gear, I don't have a lot of CPU to spare. And then like I'm definitely into the idea of it. It's just I don't have like a real strong processor, and I feel like if I got into like a pretty involved arrangement and I had all this stuff fired up, it could crash pretty fast.
Yes.
So that's kind of my main reason why I don't really do them. But I've toyed around with them and they look cool. I don't really get why you can buy an instrument and then it'll like go obsolete when your computer like gets older or something. Like that seems kind of like a rip.
That's the big argument we've heard against VST is, you could have a DAW that takes VST and a VST, and all of a sudden you upgrade your hardware and your ASIO or AD converter or something, the drivers don't match, and then all of a sudden the stuff that worked on your old hardware, your old PC, don't work on the new one, and you're going, wait, I need all this, or the VST instrument itself stops being supported and they don't have updated 64-bit drivers, and then all of a sudden you've lost this archive of whatever, and that's the argument we've heard of people being against it, and it's annoying. It's part of the software world where backwards compatibility is not even on the list of important things anymore. So,
well, and I guess the way to look at it is sort of like I don't know, lead in paint or something. So at the time, nobody knew and nobody cared. And so you just paint with it and okay, your reds are a little brighter and all this stuff. But then, operating system comes along or the world moves forward and you can't do that anymore. And so you're not going to be able to recreate with that paintbrush or that paint anymore. That's probably a terrible analogy, but just, they end up throwing it down as the people who are a little more forward thinking will say, oh, in that case, I just lay down some stems and I have that, at least I can mix that separately later. And I guess you could maybe even throw it into your hardware sampler if you wanted to. Sometimes that's a thing, but seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, like are you talking about the actual samples of those synthesizers?
Yeah, if you just save those parts individually some other way. I think it's more of what your goals are, and if all of a sudden you had a VST grand piano that you really were into and then boom, one day it's off. If you don't blink an eye at going, oh well, I have a Roland over here at JD and it has a cool piano and I'm just going to swap it out. If you don't care, then no big deal. But if it's a more specific sound that you programmed forever and you're going this whatever.
Yeah.
So, food for thought. I mean, I think it's really cool. It opens up so many possibilities, especially when you're getting into vintage synth modeling and you're going, I'd love an old Prophet 5, but I'm not going to go buy one and jack with it. And I would like the ability to have MIDI and not a CV, all this, all the advantage of the modern world. That's where you go get a virtual Prophet, and 9 times out of 10 somebody hearing it's not going to know the difference. So but it would suck to spend money on that and one day you upgrade your computer and hey, I'm sorry, your Prophet no longer works.
Right. Well, and so that sort of is a good argument for I don't like the subscription model, but Roland does have a subscription model where you can be like, well, here's their virtual instruments, and the thing is, as long as you keep paying for it, they're going to keep supporting their virtual instruments. But the problem is that's it's like a tax forever.
Expensive.
It's probably your most expensive synthesizer ever after 20 years.
Yeah, it's interesting too because it might just be my generation, but I have a harder time getting excited about a virtual synth than like a physical synth. I don't know why, but it's not as motivating for me to be like, yeah, I'm saving up for this virtual synth. I don't know.
Something I really can't touch. Neat. So excited about purchasing something on the cloud.
It's harder to get jazzed, I think.
True. I am actually very interested in projects that I've seen where people are building their own MIDI controllers, and they're physical. And I saw a guy who was kind of solving that problem for himself, where he goes like, I bought this vintage synth I have this Arturia controller. It kind of sucks because it's not really matching up to the picture of the vintage synth. And so he built his own kind of wooden box of, I don't remember what synth it was, but say it's a Prophet. And he built himself a desktop Prophet with the controllers being the same controllers that could control his virtual synth. So I think that was really neat too. So you got to be into that and
That's cool. Yeah, I respect it.
soldering savvy and whatnot, but it was pretty neat. And I was going, okay, there's a gap, there's a bridge, and let's build it. I was looking at some of your stuff online, and I saw some synthesizers that I wanted to ask you about.
Oh, cool.
One, I saw a picture of you doing a show, and it looked like a pair of Juno DS. I don't know if they were 61s or what.
Oh, yeah. So that was a work function so I teach piano and drums you've heard of it, School of Rock, I'm sure. So we do these functions of about 2 times a year where we'll have like all the students perform basically from each like a theme that they're like learning how to do. And then the staff will learn some songs to kind of get the students kind of pumped up and inspired and all that stuff. So that was from that event. And those were, it was like a Juno DS88.
Okay.
With a same exact 61 on top, same exact model. And that was because I insisted on having like a lighter weight keyboard action for some of the stuff we were doing. And then on the side, it was like I think that was like a Novation Base Station 2. So I kind of had that set up for everything. Just, I don't know. I thought that would be a pretty versatile way to go because you have like the two, digital Rompler keyboards or whatever you call them. And then you have like kind of more analog-y one on the side if you need something really serious and specific.
And so one of those Junos was hooked up to control the base station?
No, actually, the base station was just running sounds from its own bank.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Yeah. But yeah, there's some things where you don't want to be performing it on like a weighted keys, like for example, like the synth solo in Jump by Van Halen. You don't really want to be doing that on a grand piano. It's just wasn't designed for that.
No, it wants the lightweight, springy DX7.
Exactly.
Well, and kind of like, it's sort of organ versus piano, right? You do things on a B3 that you don't do on a piano and vice versa. And they're different feel.
I mean, in a way, it's like a completely different instrument, even though it's a keyboard. It's just like a synth and an organ and a piano. They're like completely, to me, different.
That's interesting. I think I've known that, but I don't know that I've really brought that to the forefront and thought, oh yeah, 88 keys are, they're all really different in feel.
Yeah, I kind of prefer like semi-weighted. If I was just to like take a one size fits all thing, like approach to things, I kind of like the semi-weighted action because it kind of feels like an organ or a synth or a piano, just kind of in the middle.
So how long have you been doing the School of Rock?
Quite a while now. I'm like getting into like double digit years now, but I started in 2012 and I just been doing it kind of like as a pay the bills type of thing.
And you teach drums?
I teach drums and like keys of all kinds. So I'll teach like synth stuff and just regular piano stuff. And you sort of direct groups to perform. And the model is like performance based. So you get to work with groups of people and then you get to work a lot of one-on-ones. So it's like pretty it's pretty rewarding, like if you're a musician and you enjoy teaching, it's like a pretty rewarding model. It's a lot of variety, So
that's cool.
I like it. I mean, I wish it paid a little more, but we can't have perfect lives, that would just be too easy.
Have you seen that develop over 10 years? I guess let me clarify, like what people are wanting from you and what you've been doing in regards to students. How has that developed over your time there?
Yeah, it's really developed, I think. I mean, when I started, I didn't know what I was doing at all. Thankfully, I was able to figure it out. And, that's like a common story with a lot of people who take on jobs or any kind, really. But yeah, now I feel like I'm in pretty high demand in a way, like I don't have any problems with student retention or things like that. And I'm doing quite well with it. It's also the business has been flourishing, so that helps too. It's not just me, it's like a business, so it's like a team effort, and it's built up over the years, and I'm kind of doing stuff on my own too now on the side. I'll just take like students on the side and try to kind of have a side hustle, and when I'm not gigging and writing and all that. So yeah, I think it's really developed, and it's helped me develop my skills tremendously, over the years. I'm such a better musician than I was when I started teaching. So anyone who's curious about trying it, they should give it a whirl, see if it's for them.
I want to ask a little bit about your gigging. Somebody we recently spoke with, they talked about doing their first gig, and they showed up with their 7-piece drum set, and very quickly whittled that down to 4, because that's a lot of stuff to lug. How have you found that to be the same? You get there and
Absolutely.
You're like, really, I need all these sounds, and actually we can get away with just a couple.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I did a lot of touring in my 20s and somewhat 30s. Yeah, there was, as a drummer primarily. And yeah, there were some tours when I was just packing like a floor tom, a snare, and a kick drum, and some cymbals and stuff, obviously. But yeah, I wasn't really going for it on the gear side. I was just kind of like, let's like break down as fast as we can and get off stage for the next act or whatever, take as little time needed to get the gear problems solved, because when you're on the road, it's just taxing and you're tired and everything's constantly in chaos. So, you just need to simplify as much as you can, especially like DIY level touring. It's a lot different,
Yeah, I think that's funny. I'll talk to a lot of people and say, yeah, we played this place or played that place when I was younger. And in their head, they think, oh, well, then you had roadies and you just showed up and played. And like, no, you are your own roadie.
We were the roadies.
And we also were our own people who drove the truck or the van across country. So, yeah, it's a lot to put on all the hats and then have to get on stage afterwards. And yeah,
it's a young man's game. I think I'm not itching to get. I mean, I'll do some road gigs here and there, but I'm not itching to get on like a 6-week get in the van tour anytime soon.
I think there's a certain age where you start getting really picky about what you do. You're like, you know what? I've done that for experience, and experience doesn't really pay the bills. So,
I mean, I know exactly when I can pinpoint the exact tour.
Oh yeah,
I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is for me anymore.
Yeah,
but
any specific event that happened?
It wasn't a specific event. It was just more like feeling burdened with a lot of responsibilities comparatively to maybe the other members, and lack of sleep, and just getting sick on the road. It was pretty bad. So, it wasn't like an inner, what do you call it? Like a inter-band type of thing that went wrong. It was just kind of the overall setup was just unrealistic for me.
No fisticuffs?
No, nothing like that. No, yeah. It was just kind of like exhausting beyond belief.
What band was that?
I'm not really at liberty to say.
That's okay.
fair enough.
So It wasn't
Yeah.
Plan B.
It wasn't. No, it was not. But
It
it was.
was-
Let's just say I was a little older. I was in my 30s, and then
We're
very,
gonna
very
call
tired.
call it Plan C.
There we go. There we go. But I'm still very good friends with all them. So
Well, and it's weird because that's the reality. And you don't see that in rock and roll like biopics or anything. Like there's nothing in there where it's always like, oh, broke up the band was his ego or the drugs. But it's not just like, this is impossible. This is an impossible thing to take on, to do all these things. And if you're just a normal person, you're just doing normal things, it's too much to ask of the human body.
exactly.
I remember fresh out of high school, we decided we were going to play. We were like, okay, we have all these songs. We want to show our friends. We're not old enough to play bars or something like that. We figured there's this little community theater place over here. We want it to be more intimate. So we didn't want it to be in a bar. And so we were like, okay, we're going to rent this out. We talked to the managers over there, and they're like, cool, you can do one of two things. You can we can take a cut of the door, or you can just rent it for $300 and hope you make it back. And I remember hauling all the gear up there, playing the show, and hauling it all back. And I was walking off stage, and I felt terrible. It's because I'd given myself mono. Like, I was just physically exhausted, and then I was out for a month because of one show. And now, yeah, we built it all up from the ground up, but it's just like, thank God I learned that way younger and said, okay, there's boundaries are good. Let's learn to do boundaries. And
Yes, I learned that a lot later, but I still learned it, so that's good. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a certain time frame in your life where you can drive 15 hours to a gig and get kind of into the adventure of it and, you know, be healthy enough to not get sick. I have to be much more strategic about my road gigs these days just because it's gotta be, I gotta shower, I have to sleep, and that's that. So
Is sea gaze in your future?
I don't know. I hope
Okay.
so. That sounds like something I'd be interested in, but
Okay.
I'm the up and coming kind of level, I guess, of being a solo musician, solo artist.
Well, let's talk about Dream Commander. When
Sure.
did that come to fruition?
Again, lockdown times. That's kind of where I just had a lot of time on my hands, and I just thought about starting my own thing, and I kind of was like at a point with playing in bands where I was kind of like still open to the idea of it, but the ship had sailed in terms of like that being my sole dream in life, you know? And so I was thinking, well, hey, I know enough now where I can kind of just put on my own thing. Eventually it could lead to another band down the road if, say, it grew to a point where I could hire players. Just kind of like was writing my own electronic music and just kind of enjoying that whole process, and decided to come up with a name and try to start releasing some stuff. And yeah, that's kind of when it started going around lockdown 2020, 2021 in there. I think that's around when my first release was. And I'm still doing it. I'm actually kind of working on a new release right now, hoping to get something out hopefully by the middle of the year, if not the end. But it's just like, gosh, time just goes so fast nowadays.
You've got an album out there and you've got an EP. Is there stuff that you have that's unreleased or that I'm not? What's going on with it now?
Sure. Yeah. So I have like the very first EP. It's called Dampener. And then I kind of put out another EP called World Builder, but it is kind of like almost like a full release. It's just shorter. It's like 8 tracks, but it's like, I don't know, 25 minutes, which is basically like a full length in 2024, as far as I'm concerned. It's just where things are going. But yeah, now I'm working on a new set of tracks, and it's like I'm definitely reaching that stage where I know way more than I used to, and it's actually causing things to take way longer because I want it to sound, you know, better than the other stuff. So I'm getting more critical and just spending way more time just zooming in with the microscope and all that. So, but it's cool. I'm doing some new stuff. Like I'm experimenting with vocals and maybe singing again, and which all the other stuff is instrumental. So who knows? Maybe this is a new direction for me, and I'm really itching to get something out there soon from this new collection of songs I'm working on. It's pretty fun stuff. So,
how would you describe the Dream Commander sound from anything that you may have or may have not, envisioned, and then what, listening to it now, what it is?
Yeah, and that's a good question. So I think like the whole idea of the project was to create this sort of like a cinematical kind of vibey instrumental project where it was like kind of taking cues from stuff like vintage, kind of nostalgia type of things like John Carpenter, or like stuff like Cinemax movies, like from that era of like when you would just kind of throw on TV and there would just be this random kind of electronic sounding stuff going on. I guess that stuff's really popular now, and it has a whole genre to it, which I'm actually kind of I don't know if I'm really in that genre or not, but it's definitely, I'm connected to it on social media, so it kind of feels like I am. But
I'd say from an outside observer or a listener that there's some overlap definitely in the, what people are calling synth wave and dark wave and things like that. But I don't think you sound specifically like anybody, but I hear or infer influences, which I think we share, from the time and era we grew up on, those kind of pure synthy, Vangelis and some of the pop bands and things like that. So it's very cool.
Thanks. Yeah. I think I was really influenced by, like, in the beginning of the project, I was really inspired by like music by David Lynch films and just,
Toto.
Just just kind of like just a lot of atmospheric kind of stuff too, but not necessarily techno, just more kind of like electronic based, like Vangelis. And sometimes my friend Andy says it sounds like Jean, what's his name, Jean something, French guy. I'm not that as familiar with this stuff obviously, but I like the sort of cinematic, dramatic kind of feeling electronic music that's not necessarily pop, but yeah, it kind of draws more from mood and environment and things of that nature.
I agree, and I think I'm glad that you said you are getting into experimenting with vocal elements and or lyrical stuff, because I think what you have now is a great backbone that if those things were interlaced or applied on top, it just gives it that warmth and really jumps a line from synthetic to truly emotional. And I'd love to hear that. So
cool. Thank you. Yeah. Do you create music, like electronic music too, or?
I do. I haven't put out anything in a long while. I've took a hiatus and I'm kind of slowly getting back into it. Like I said before, I'm kind of Cubase based, except my problem is I have Cubase 13 now, which I recently got, and I think the last version of Cubase I was on was 6 or 8, and I feel like a first grader now. I'm like, well, where is this function and where is this? I'm trying to relearn all this stuff, and it's frustrating where I'll pull it out and mess with it until I just get annoyed, and then I put it away, and then I'm coming back out. But it's all coming back. But I want to do that, and before I kept getting stuck in these, I'm not releasing anything until it's perfect, and I just kept working on it forever. And then it's like, oh, hey, like 12 years later, here's 10 tracks. And even now, if I listen to stuff that I've put out, I'm sitting there going, oh, that's too loud. This is annoying. That's messed up. And so I don't know. I've evolved to where I'm almost like get stuff to the George Lucas 75% of pretty good and just keep shuffling it out, man. And then you'll have your diamonds if you throw out 1,000 tracks, you're going to have a bunch that are really, really good. So kind of a switch in attitude. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Cool.
and Mike and I have talked about this before, where when you have too many options, you do get into that whole doom scroll mentality of, well, I don't know what to do. And so it comes back to your little cassette recorder Porta Studio thing, which is, well, when you give me parameters and I have to stay within inside of this, then maybe that's the idea, is to just do it within the parameters, and that way I don't have to make very many decisions. But the Cubase, especially today, we've talked about this as well. You can fool around on a keyboard on a synthesizer, and you're like, that's cool. I really like the way this sounds. All right, let's fire up the DAW. Right? You fire it up, and it's booting. You're like, all right, cool. And then create some tracks, and all of a sudden you have shifted gears from creativity, which is listening and being in the moment and flow, to now I got to make this work technically. Oh, that's not working. Oh, now I got to troubleshoot. And those are two completely different sides to be on.
Yeah.
And it is hard to get back to flow from technical, for me anyway. And it kills the creative children in my brain the moment I turn on anything to record.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Does that happen to you?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I definitely have like a creative process though. I don't know how great it is, but I try to not care about sound design, or sophistication of the parts until I have like a completed idea. I try to just like get the ideas on paper or whatever you want to call it before kind of leaning into the tech side. So what I'll do is I'll throw up like a bass line or like an idea, like a 8-bar kind of thing, with like a pad and a bass line, or like a melody and this drum beat. And then I'll just kind of build around it. And it's almost kind of like sketching,
I see.
So I'm not too preoccupied with the like details at that point. But then as soon as I kind of finish an arrangement, that's when I'm like kind of like ready to like sink my teeth into the more fun stuff, like the fine tuning, which is my favorite part.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I do too. It kind of sounds like that you've either learned Reaper enough that it stays out of your way, or Reaper just stays out of your way so that you can actually get things done.
I think it's both, because like Reaper is just kind of like an empty vessel. Is you just put stuff into it, and then like once you figure out the inputs and that, I mean, yeah, you just kind of throw stuff into the tracks. And I think of it as just like, obviously, same as any kind of analog workflow, I guess. I guess I approach it that way because I came up kind of recording in analog type environments anyways, so that's probably where my brain is stuck.
Yeah, what is the program you showed me, and I can't remember it. Michael Nimocks, the one where you can turn the rack around and that's how you patch. It's the
that's
one Reason. Yeah.
Yeah. You just hit tab, and there's cables that wiggle around, like you flip the thing around, and you can click on something and actually patch it in. And that was revolutionary when that happened, because that's the world I was coming from. And I'm like,
everybody understands that.
And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And you can see where the wires are going. And it's spaghetti back there, which is what you're used to, but you could click on one and it'll highlight the path, and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Nice.
So that was a nice kind of transition to that. But I think what you're doing with building the core song and getting the arrangement done, and then messing with sounds and textures and all that stuff, is smart. It's something I always got carried away. I would get sidetracked with other things. And then later on, my problem was like, this arrangement sucks, or something like that. So you to me sound more like a songwriter. like a pure songwriter where here's my core idea and you could play this on flute, you could play it on guitar, you can put it in here, you can do whatever you want, and it's all going to be really cool. So do you generally, I know you're into keys and you have the guitar experience.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a go-to for writing stuff, or is it basically here's a melody in my head and I'm just going to get it down?
I have a few kind of entry points for getting into like a composition. So sometimes I'll just throw on my voice memo recorder and just sit on a drum kit and just come up with some beats that I feeling creative about. And then I might just use that as like a launching point. Or I'll do the same thing with like just like a piano. Like I have like a digital grand piano, more like a piano than a synth basically. And you can come up with ideas there. Just it's a little more conducive to like writing music than like a synth would be. But I haven't really written anything on guitar in a long time. Maybe I should try that sometime. But I've definitely come up with the riffs and ideas just with synths too. But I just try to come up with like, yeah, some angle of like, let's start with a bass line and build from that, or start with a drum loop and build from that, or just some other angle. Cause like I just kind of can't get stuck with like one way to do it. I feel like it'll just sound too similar.
I think that's the question we all have, and I still have at some point, is like, how do you write a song? Because people that kind of want some kind of mentorship from me are like, so what do you do? Is it bass and drums first? And they're looking for me to be like, yes, bass and drums always. And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm still experimenting, trying to find that out.
The idea that there's a one way to do it is incredibly deflating to me.
Well,
and take any rockumentary on some iconic song, and 9 times out of 10 they're like, we were done with our session and the guy was just doing some BS in the corner, and we're like, wait, no, do that part again. Okay, and that was the impetus for this, worldwide mega hit or whatever. It's always something that's non-conventional, so to speak, and everybody's looking for that lightning in a bottle. And I think part of my journey is just trying to figure out what works best for me, but I haven't found it yet. But I think that means I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
I think so too, but it is funny that you say, how do you write a song? That reminds me of the first time I had a kind of a real job. It was during the .com era, and they hired me for video. They said, all right, so Mike, how do you make a video? How do you make web video? And I was like, are you asking me how to just put in a step-by-step of what I've learned my entire life of being alive and all of the 4 years of school that I went to, and you just want me to condense that down into anybody can do this? It's just ridiculous, Like, no,
was this
can't.
person perchance wearing a suit and tie?
Yeah, they like to count beans. Sure.
Yeah. I think part of the I guess fun of creating is just like the curiosity and the discovery factor of doing it, maybe coming at it from a new angle. And I feel like having an idea is always helpful. Like, even if it's just like a name of the song, because I mean, with instrumental music, there's no lyrics. So it's like a song could kind of go any direction you want it to, just with the feeling of the mood of the song. And so, yeah, I've definitely had like a title kind of guide me creatively in a certain direction, or just like, I want this to sound kind of like, I don't know, some aspect of my childhood that I can trying to recreate, for comfort reasons or something along those lines.
Song from the basement.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to recreate my basement days. But
so there's a good album title for you. Basement Days.
Basement Days. I like it. I have a list of like song titles and album title ideas, just a big list of words just strung together that I can kind of like go take a look at and feel inspiration if I need it. Or if I have a song where I'm like, what is this? And then I go look at the list and I'll just do the reverse engineering version of that, or I'll just pick something that I feel like goes with it.
Here's the riddle. Which title is this? And you're like, oh, it's clearly that one. I like that. Very cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're getting ideas in all aspects all over the place, but you're smart enough to record them, whether written or with a voice recorder or something like that. So
yeah, the memo recorder, I can certainly relate to that because I remember more than once being stuck in traffic. You're sitting at a stoplight and I'm humming to myself something I don't think I've ever heard before. And so I just pull it up, throw it in my pocket, and then I just start singing it on the way home. Different parts that should be in it. And of course, I'm like, all right, well, we'll go turn that into a song. And then, something's, plumbing's blown up at home or something's not working or whatever. So someday when I die, if anybody goes through my phone, they are going to think I am nuts because there's all these memo recordings to myself of just a bunch of mumbling and humming and weirdness. But yeah, it is a real guilt. Yeah, it's a really good way to let the technology get out of the way and just let yourself flow. And but
I learned it the hard way of having some melody whilst driving or doing something where I couldn't, whatever. And I was like, I won't forget this. And then later in the day, I'm trying to remember it, and I'm like, oh, God.
It was the best song ever. Just like Jack Black, whatever this is the best song ever. Oh man, I'm screwing this up. You know the one I'm talking
Tenacious
about.
D?
Yeah, Tenacious D. And this is not the greatest song. It's a tribute.
Tribute. That's the name of it.
Because we couldn't remember it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. But yeah, like I've actually done it the other way too, where I was like trying to figure out how to finish a part, and then it came to me when I was just walking somewhere, and then I had to just record that into my voice memo. But that was like a direct idea that just I could plug into the song, so didn't get lost, thankfully. I like voice memos. I always tell my students you should use it to listen to your own playing and just try to get another perspective on how you could improve.
Are you trying to teach kids that their phone can do more than play video games and text their friends? I don't know if that's allowed.
Only some of them. Of them. No.
Hey, there's a calendar in here. What's that for?
A select few lucky ones.
So,
what do you mean I could be organized? Shut up.
Yeah. So, wait, this thing will answer any question I have? How? Okay. Anyways, I know you said you were classically trained in keys, and I saw a couple videos of you playing some classical pieces a la Bach.
Okay,
or something like that. Is that just something you're still into? Or are you teaching that as a hobby?
I don't really teach classical music. I have one student who's interested in it, so that's fun. But yeah, I just more of a hobby and just more of staying kind of focused on my instrument. And I just enjoy all genres of piano pretty much. So I like rock piano. I like classical piano. I'm not that great at jazz, but I'll try to do that sometimes. I started learning the Bach inventions, the 2-part inventions, and I was like, oh, this would be kind of like a fun series, I guess, to post on Instagram or YouTube. And so yeah, there's like 14 or 15 of them, and I think I'm down to like one. I have one left to like record, and it's nerve-wracking trying to play those pieces without messing up, like in one take. It's, even though they're not that long, it's just so many notes, and it's pretty fast usually. So yeah, I guess, yeah, it's been kind of interesting.
Any favorite?
Yeah, I like the 13 one in A minor. That one turned out really good. But yeah, that I love Bach. I love studying Chopin and other composers. Just kind of your mainstream ones. I'm not really super into like obscure composers, but I like the process of reading music and just that whole thing. It's really rewarding to me as a musician. And I try to tell people that like reading music is a really powerful tool, but you can also play by ear, or you can do both. You know, if you want to, you can learn to do both. And I feel like I've gotten to that point where I can do both. I'm not like a great sight reader or anything. I can't just sit down and read like Beethoven first time, play it perfect or anything, but it's still fun. It's a good challenge for the brain, and it's musically rewarding, especially hearing those compositions come to life right in front of you, you know?
While you were talking about that, I was imagining a piano, right? And that I think all of us, probably the first keys that we touched were probably a piano key. And so I do remember hearing the piano when I was younger and wanting, when I saw somebody play it and hearing other things, there was a song or a couple of songs that I was like, oh, I think I can do that. And I would really like to teach myself or learn how to do that. And so for me, that was Scott Joplin's The Entertainer, right? Do you remember yours, or do you remember that moment?
Well, yeah, The Entertainer was huge in my house when I was growing up. My dad constantly talked about the movie The Sting with Paul Newman, I think, Robert Redford. And so that was like a staple in my household growing up. And so when I learned to play the Entertainer, you know, I was revered in my house as a great talent, you know.
Right.
And it wasn't even like the real version. It's just like a kid's version, you know.
Well, and it doesn't matter because, you're a rock star anyway. The other one I remember is hearing was Linus and Lucy, that theme, and just the whole Charlie Brown, Snoopy, Christmas time stuff.
Scaraldi, yeah. Yeah, that stuff's so iconic. And I never learned that until I was an adult, but I remember that was a huge song for kids in piano lessons, you know. They were always learning Linus and Lucy. And,
well, it's tricky. I mean, because I always knew, you know, the left hand, I could play it, no problem, when I was a kid. And the right hand, I could play it, no problem. But to play them together, that's something else.
Was that written
dicey
for that animation, or was that a song that existed previously?
Oh,
if I was to guess, I would think they went together.
Okay.
I don't know, though.
I think it's known as the Peanuts theme. I mean, it's not like, you know, Dancing on the Water, and then they adopted it for that. So maybe I'm answering my own question here, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's actually called Linus and Lucy.
Okay.
I think that's the real name. But who knows when he wrote it? I mean, I don't know. It could have been just they came up with some deal at the time he had it going. It's a good question, though.
It's very interesting, though. A lot of people say, hey, do you like jazz? They're like, eh. But then, you know, everybody loves the Mr. Rogers theme. Everybody loves the Peanuts theme. And then, you know, there was that, but then they also had the kind of falling piano. There are other cues from that show it's all jazz piano. Yeah. And everybody loves it. So it's very interesting. And everybody loves, you know, Take Five and all this other stuff.
Yeah, even like the mom or the parents, it was just like a muted trumpet. That was the voice.
I remember the teacher.
I think jazz was just like really mainstream around that time. It was just coming up as a mainstream thing, so it's probably pretty hip to include that aspect of music in that animation.
Back when they said Daddy-O and Cat. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dave Brubeck, and I actually went through a huge Dave Brubeck phase when I was like a teenager. I actually got to see him perform.
Oh, wow.
So
that's
fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where was that?
Lucky.
It was at a place called the Paramount Theater here in Seattle.
Oh, we have one of those in Austin.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. One of my favorite concerts ever was Steely Dan at the Paramount Theater. Such a perfect show.
Right?
Yeah, that was like 2008 or 9, I think. So
that's another thing we end up usually hitting on when we do these interviews is, you know, what was your first concert? What was your best concert? And some of the when my young, was talking about his first concert. It was like, you at Red Rock, really? Like you saw the best band in the best place for the first time.
Wild.
Like it's unfair, is what it is.
Wait, remind me who he saw at Red Rocks.
I want to say no, it wasn't Depeche Mode. It was
Was it
Was it
Cure?
New Order? Or
no, who did
not New
who
Order.
did Rio
Pet Shop Boys.
and
Duran Duran.
I think it was Duran Duran at Red Rocks is
Red
what
Rocks.
he said. But it was like, really? Them? Cool.
One of my first concerts, I think the very first like big concert I went to that wasn't just like a local band kind of thing was this thing called Bumbershoot we have here in Seattle. It's like a festival, and I think I saw Parliament and that band, the Presidents of the United States.
Oh, I still like them.
Who say?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, one of my very first concerts that I really like have a vivid memory of is like Rage Against the Machine in the 90s. That was pretty huge. It was like a kind of arena, you know. It was like an arena event.
Yeah. The reason I'm laughing so much is because when we were trying to come up with a band name, we thought we would be Rage Against the Machine.
That band is pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
Think about it. Different levels of irony there.
Yeah.
But when you're a teenager, I mean, in the 90s, it's like, that's it. You know, that's the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think I hit on it, and I could be wrong here. Sometimes we ask the question, how do we know you? And I think, well, I'll just let you answer how we got hooked up.
My Young is a friend of mine now. Well, I met him through his son, who's a student of mine,
okay.
Oliver's son. And I didn't really know much about his bands until we met. And then I was like, oh, actually, you know, we've played together at an event, but I just hadn't met him at that time. But we played at a Valentine's Day event at this club called Nimocks, probably around 2016 or something in there, 2017. And it was like a cover night where a lot of bands just did covers. I think it was just like Pixies covers.
Yeah.
So,
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think every band was just doing Pixies covers, if I remember. But his band Jupe Jupe played at that, and I remember hearing that band name and just like kind of remembering it. And then once I met his son Oliver and met him, I was like, oh yeah, Jupe Jupe, I know who you guys are. That's how I know Mai, and then Mai introduced me to you guys. So after I watched his interview that you guys did with him, which was fun. I watched pretty much the whole thing. So
Oh, cool. Well,
Yeah,
thank
he
you
was
for doing
sitting
that.
there going, he's like, I didn't know what to expect. I kind of, not really a whole lot of arm twisting, but he was like, okay, I'll do this. And so he said he was a little nervous, but at the end he was like, yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was cool.
Yeah.
yeah, I got a lot out of that. That was fun. That was a fun watch, and I loved all the different nerdy synthy stuff that you guys touched base on. That was kind of interesting to me.
You knew Mai kind of the same way that I knew Mai, and that I had no idea that years later we'd be interviewing him, and he was like, oh, wait a second, you played in Austin? Wait, we played that gig too. Oh, we've played with each other before. But it wasn't
Without
until
any knowledge. Yeah.
years later that we made that connection. That's fun.
Nice. Yeah, I love it when that happens. It's always fun.
Well, I thought we were going to talk to somebody on, on the West Coast, and he's like, yeah, I lived in Plano, and I'm going, what? So
Yeah.
outside of Dallas, and I'm like, okay, no, it's funny. But you grew up in Seattle. Is that where you're from?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. So, but just one more note about my interview was like, I never noticed he had a Southern Texan kind of accent until you guys started talking to him. I think it might have brought it out a little bit more.
Oh, that's funny.
It does.
Yeah, I've seen that with people where they kind of roll back into it. Yeah, we
But
said he was
yeah.
there in high school, and then it was in Oklahoma, so not too far.
I was born in Seattle, and I kind of grew up in this place called Everett. It's like a little bit north of Seattle, and then I kind of just moved right back to Seattle as soon as I moved out of my apartment, or moved out of my parents into an apartment, and kind of just been here ever since. So
Isn't Everett where the Sea Gaze Festival is?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That sounds about right. I'm not super educated on sea gaze, but I'm glad you are. That's,
It's all from Mai, actually. He was
okay.
saying they call it that because it's on the sea or it's close to the ocean, and it's kind of their shoegaze festival, and so they call it
That's
sea
true.
gaze. And I'm going, oh, okay, that's kind of neat. So I was asking him where they're playing next, and he brought that up, and we were going, what is that? So that's how I know about that. So you're up in the area, so I was wondering, I mean, are you playing any live stuff as Train Commander?
I am actually, but I've been on a little bit of a break just because I've been trying to be disciplined about this writing thing. And it's just too impossible to like play gigs constantly and get anything done in the studio. So I have to kind of just cut myself off from performing until I'm like kind of ready to, in the finishing stages of this release, basically. And it sucks too, because sometimes I get opportunities to like perform with Dream Commander or like perform with another group, and I'm just kind of have to like bite my tongue and be like, yeah, it's not the right time right now. I did some shows in 2023. I did like maybe 5 or 6 shows, and I did Portland and like Everett, and I did Seattle a few times. And yeah, I really like performing. I've never performed solo before, so it's kind of jarring just being on stage all by yourself. It's pretty vulnerable, but it's definitely like a path to growing as a musician, I think.
How do you think that's going to look technically for you? Clearly we've already had the conversation about I'm not taking everything I own. I'm going to streamline and take what I need. How would you do that with, backing tracks? Are you planning to sequence live?
This is very DIY, but I just kind of bounce a lot of my tracks down to a WAV file and perform as much as I can over top of it. I'm kind of experimenting with like separating some stuff out, like bass, drums, and pads maybe, or whatever, like other tracks, just to try to submix it a little bit more before giving it to the house. But that's kind of new terrain for me, and I'm like just kind of learning about it right now. Also, I kind of want to incorporate some visual element soon, more visual something or other to watch, because it's just kind of boring to see a guy on stage by himself, in my opinion. I mean, unless there's something else happening, but it's pretty basic for now. I just kind of have like WAV files, and I give those to the house, and then I just try to rock out over top of those.
The visual element is important, and it's easy to forget that whenever you are writing songs or thinking about performing them in front of a bunch of people, because you're like, let's just get this technically right, and proficient and sounding good and a good performance. One of the things that always stuck with me was my drummer moved to Denton, North Texas, to go to school there for a little while. And he talked about his roommate who, I want to say he said he had a guitar, but did not know how to play it, but wanted to start a band anyway. And they were going to put on long wigs with long hair and capes and have fans on the stage that they could turn on during the guitar solo to blow their hair and their capes. Visual is important.
Yeah, exactly.
That alone made me want to go see them, even though I knew they weren't even musicians.
I'm obsessed with the idea of having some kind of visual accompaniment. So like one time I took the last sequence of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I like the Oddity. I think we rename it that.
I was talking about Bowie.
That's David Bowie.
Yeah, earlier this morning, so that's where that came from. But yeah. So I took that like sequence, that 15-minute sequence or whatever, where it's just like laser beams and lights and stuff, and I just like slowed it down to about 30%, so I could just play that whole sequence over my set and then I never had to worry about like editing it. I mean, it's probably illegal, but whatever, who cares?
It's art. It's art, and I think there's some fair use in there.
Yeah, I think you're right. And so let's go with that. That was like my first step into like doing something visual, like accompanying like my music. And yeah, I want to keep trying to do that because I think it's important. But again, it's another thing you have to focus on that takes time. And it's hard when it's just you. Like I need to kind of team up with someone. And
yeah, you got to find somebody
that.
who's passionate and wants to like really experiment in on the same tracks that you do. And those people are hard to find, and you're lucky when you do find them. But I do want to kind of rewind a little bit towards you touched on intellectual property, and that's always a rough one, right? Because here we are, we're musicians and we create, and we obviously don't want people to take things from us, but also you realize this is the great big world, and we all know that we shouldn't take things from other people, but there's this line or this idea that nothing is original. This has all been done before. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts just on copyright or ownership of music or anything in general, or if that's just like, I don't even want to touch that. Let's move on.
No, I do. I think it's important to have ownership on some level. I don't know. It's just it's wild out there right now. Just it's like everything you can just stream anything you can think of. I think ownership is kind of gives you a sense of pride in your creation, and thinking at least that you have your own spin on it is kind of like a point of self pride or congratulatoryism or whatever you want to call it. It's just kind of makes you feel like you have a different perspective or a different angle on something that you're doing as compared to someone else. So, I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's okay to just have that. But yeah, it's like there's definitely boundaries that I wouldn't cross. Like, I don't really like use samples in my work much at all. Actually, I've never have. But using that stuff, I don't have any problem with other people doing it. But for me, it's kind of like I'd rather just think of something, try to think of my own thing and see if I can do that. I mean, obviously using that visual was kind of crossing a line, but I'm not really a visual artist, so I don't really count it, you know?
You have to start somewhere, right? Like you can't just become the god of lighting just because you want to. You have to start somewhere. Just like we had to start somewhere with creating music, we had to learn the entertainer, you know? We had to learn somebody else's thing, and then we can go, oh, this works in that, and we'll use bits and pieces. And
I still play covers and teach covers to this day, and I enjoy playing other people's music, you know, and hopefully within the confines of the law or whatever.
I will say I did enjoy, I looked at your YouTube channel a little bit, and you have a how to play Van Halen's Jump, the thing that everybody knows. And I've been playing it for years, and I thought, oh, I'll watch this 2-minute thing. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's how oh, whoops! I've been playing it wrong.
Incorrectly.
Okay, that's
what?
Inversion of F there. Okay.
I think I learned the other day that I taught it wrong from the actual recording. Like, I'm just gonna say it's my version, you know, my version.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds close enough.
There's like one detail in the left hand that I probably got wrong and that I just discovered a week ago or two in a lesson. So
he also did a Tom Sawyer synth tutorial.
Well, I need to look that one up.
That was fun. Yeah. I was just sitting around in lockdown trying to come up with short video ideas that wouldn't take a long time to edit. And I still want to like do those videos, but with my schedule, like lately, the last couple of years, it's been too difficult. But that's kind of on my list of like things to do still, is just like more of those types of videos, because they're like super fun and they get a lot of views actually. And that's fun too, because people get a lot out of it, you know, more than me just playing Bach. It's like 30 views, nobody cares, but I like it. It's fun for me.
I want to ask a question which may help us all, but I'm a kid of fighting for knowledge about bands that I liked growing up, where you just find snippets in short magazine articles, or
Yeah.
here's a Rolling Stone thing, and you learn little nuggets of things, or somebody says something on the radio, and you're going, "What, really?" One thing that was in common with a lot of the synth pop and kind of punk and bands that I was big Anglophile was Melody Maker, this elusive magazine where, oh, well, these two got connected because he put an ad in Melody Maker saying, musician looking for vocalists, here's the tryouts type thing. I'm like, where the hell is this stuff happening? And so my question is, what is the modern day Melody Maker? Because if you're looking for a visual artist, and we've done stuff like that before, where we went to local college and universities that had visual programs, and they always have this showcase at the end of the year with all this really cool, funky looking stuff. And you go to the student, you're like, "Can I put this in my show?" Spraying on the white sheet behind me, and they're going, "Can I get a credit?" Saying I was in so and so show, and you're like, "Done, deal." So that may be something there, but I know that you're into singing, but I don't know if you're looking for a vocalist. But where's the Melody Maker where you're like,
Man.
dark synthwave, awesome dude looking to tour, needs vocalist for collab?
Yeah, I think it's in Instagram, maybe social media. But it's like you kind of need to network a little bit first before you can put stuff out there, because
looking for the musical LinkedIn. That's what I'm looking for.
Musical LinkedIn.
I'm sure there already is something. I'm not dreaming up something that nobody's thought of, but I just haven't been out there looking for it, nor have I heard of it.
I think Craigslist is still going.
Yeah. Like band needs drummer. Show up on this date and time, bring your kit.
I mean, not too long ago, I joined a band through Facebook.
Okay.
Ad on a Facebook forum, like a Seattle music forum. I think it's just all like on social media now.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, man, where would you buy something like that? And somebody goes, "Oh, I bought it on Amazon." I'm going, I knew that. I could have looked there, but for some reason it was elusive. Okay, that makes sense. I don't even know if Melody Maker is still around.
Don't believe it is.
Okay.
It's probably as a Facebook group.
There's this one punk Razorcake magazine, zine or whatever. I see those. I see new ones of those.
That's awesome.
Okay.
That blows my mind.
Yeah.
No, because I'm in the same boat. I can't sing. I know that. And I'm going to be looking for some kind of vocal artist. And I know you can go to university programs where people are just looking to pad their resume and do interesting and cool projects, and that's fine. It'd be nice if you could view ads from the other perspective of vocalists looking for musical acts type thing.
Right.
So
I think I see like stuff like that on my Facebook thread because I'm in a Seattle musicians basically like group, and like people throw stuff on there being like kind of exactly what you're just saying, like,
okay,
I'm a vocalist looking for a project, or I need a vocalist, and then 30 comments or maybe 2 comments, you just never know. But I think people are still connecting on that way, just no Melody Maker.
Yeah.
Maybe it's still going. I don't know. I haven't seen one lately.
It's stuck in my brain for some reason, and there were all these stories of bands in the late 70s throughout the 80s. It was like, oh, well, we answered an ad and whatever, and I'm just going, where's this? Oh, it's not here. Damn it. So
yeah, that was like a big trend for a while.
I think it was like the 4-track where it's restrictive creativity, and because the world didn't have the internet back then, it was all kind of channeled to a single place that had enough of a critical mass that it could exist. And now it's probably just spread out, like you're saying. There's Facebook stuff here, there's Craigslist stuff here, there's probably some local meetup group, which is really awesome for 3 years and then defunct. And so, okay.
It's interesting.
I do want to get into your gear, because we're really gearheads at heart, and I'm very into gear that I've never had any interaction with, and then to really kind of the production world, because that's where I am. I'm the guy that's crawling around behind the desk, plugging in crap, making sure it works and all that. So tell me about the synths that you've got behind you there.
Yeah, well, I have a pretty modest collection going here, but pretty much everything I need is right here. So I have like my Korg Kross, so I use that for a lot of like utilitarian needs, like playing cover gigs, and I play all my Dream Commander gigs using that.
Okay.
Just because it can do anything, it can do any sound. I mean, it's not going to do every sound authentically, but it can do a pretty good job at everything. And then I have
So it's your Swiss Army knife, but if you were going to say, hey, there's one thing that really shines on it, is there like a particular lead or pad or something?
It has pretty good analog synth replicated sounds, I'd say.
Okay.
Like the saw wave samples are really solid, and it's quite good quality for the price, I think.
What is it? Is it an analog modeling synth, or is it a sample
Sort of.
wavetable? Or
It's just a sample based synth, so like it's all digital.
Okay.
And it has like piano like samples, and there's a whole library of pianos. It has like organs, brass, just anything you can think of, like synth leads, synth pads. And then if you want to kind of create stuff like sounds from scratch, you can just kind of deep dive into the menus and pick like an untouched waveform, but it's actually just a sample of a waveform, but still pretty close. And you can kind of like use the virtual analog modeling stuff inside of there to like get what you want out of it. You can actually do a lot of crazy stuff that I don't even really know how to do, but
kind of like a Rompler with filters.
it's exactly, yeah. It's a Rompler for sure.
does it have any onboard effects that you utilize?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
You can record in it, you can sequence in it, you can load samples into it. It kind of just does everything, but it's all like very kind of low level. It's none of this stuff is professional, high like quality stuff, but I played on 100 gigs with it probably.
Where it has the kind of 16 square pads on the control board. And what are those to bring up stuff, or are those sample triggers? Or
So those can be favorites or like wave, sorry, not wave, but sample like triggers, like you just said. It could do both.
Well, that sounds great for a live performance. Just pre-program like song 1, 2. Here's my thing here. Okay, very cool.
Yeah, I've used it for like just like little loops. I've just like hit a sample and it'll like loop it with the song, with the track that's already playing, and
Cool.
That's cool. But yeah, I mostly use those pads just to do favorite banks because it's easier to just hit the pads than like scroll.
Yes.
Yeah, especially in a live situation where you're like, oh, I can scroll down to 88, no problem, and then it's easier to just press the button for the next thing.
188.
So like, oops, I accidentally called up a trumpet. Damn it.
Yeah. So that's kind of my main axe, and then I don't have it here, but I have like a Roland VR730, which is kind of like a Hammond clone wheel or whatever you want to call it, but it also has synth and piano sounds in it too, so that's pretty powerful.
Does it have a Leslie, like a little Leslie emulator on it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You can tweak it to different settings and all that, and there's the drawbars.
Drawbars.
It's pretty much what it does best is being a Hammond
B3.
clone, but it just happens to have all the other sounds you need. So that's cool. And that's kind of what I use for like gigging in my cover bands, because those types of bands are less specialized. So you kind of just need a little bit of everything. Then I have a DeepMind, the DeepMind
Behringer.
6. Yeah.
So
So
Behringer
fucking-
number 2.
Oh yeah, I have like 4, I think, Behringer.
Oh wow.
Sounds-
Okay.
Yeah.
So and the DeepMind, that's the Juno 106 clone.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's like a Juno Plus. It has like a lot of features and a lot of built-in effects. It's overwhelming, actually. But you can kind of just use the basic interface to come up with some pretty solid patches, and you can save patches which is really nice because a lot of the synths, the older ones, you can't. I kind of sound design a lot of my own little patches on that DeepMind, and then I save them with the song title that I'm working on, and I can kind of go back and recall them when needed or play it live. I tried to play that live once and it didn't go great, so I haven't taken it out since, but I might do it again. You never know. It's cool. It's like an actual real analog poly synth. What more can you ask
I've heard
for?
good things about it. I've never actually played around with one.
Yeah, it's fun. And then I have like a Model D, a Behringer Model D mini Moog clone, I believe. This thing right here.
It's like a desktop Moog.
It's like a desktop mini Moog clone, yeah.
Okay.
So
Very
that's
cool.
really fun. You can get a lot of fun, really cool synth sounds from that, leads and bass lines and bass sounds and stuff. But yeah, it's all like set up exactly like the mini Moog, I believe, is the synth they modeled it after. Those are really fun. And then I have like a MS1 here.
What is an MS1?
Those are cool.
I don't know.
That's what we talked about before, the SH101 clone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I know those come in different colors. Is that just the color, or do they have different functionality? Do you know?
It's just the color, yeah. They're all the same.
There was like a blue and a silver and a red one. Okay.
Yeah, it's just marketing, just flashy marketing. It's fun though. So yeah, that's pretty much. I think that's it. I guess I have a Roland. It's called like a TR8. It's like a drum 808 replica. It's kind of a mini one. You can kind of see it. It's like
sitting right there.
That's like their new thing, right? Yeah.
It's like a miniature 808.
Yeah, it's like the Juno X kind of thing, where it's except for the 808.
Except the Juno X is like $2,000 and this thing's like $300. But
yeah, the Juno X is on the wish list.
Exactly. I was looking them up after the Maya Young interview. I was like, damn it, I want one. But
well, and the cool thing about it was that they're like, let's just throw a nice piano on there, which is great because all of a sudden one sound expands the usage of this by 4.
That's a huge selling point for a guy like me too.
Yeah, it's one less. You just got to carry one keyboard instead of lots.
Yeah, I mean, you can model a quote piano on a Juno 106 or the Juno X type thing, but it sounds like a digital oscillator analog piano,
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, never mind. But to throw in a PCM sample of a grand piano on there from a Roland, which always, in my opinion, had really nice kind of clean, solid piano sounds, is just icing, and it didn't take them anything but forethought to do it. So
right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
They have the technology.
all right, one thing's missing from this. Where are you pulling your drums from?
Okay, so there's like a huge drum bank inside the Korg Kross,
Okay.
and most of the sounds are coming from that, and a few of the sounds come from the Roland 808, but it's harder to get those sounds into my DAW for some reason, and to get everything synced up. I don't know why. I've done it, but it's a little more challenging, and the Kross sounds are pretty good, so I've been using those on a lot of stuff. I used a few drum sounds from the Roland VR too, but those are just like stock Roland sounds, just like the 808. A lot of the same, they have like basically that keyboard has all the different classic analog sound sets, like the 707, the 909, the 808, just like all inside of there. So sometimes I'll just grab stuff from that keyboard and I'll just throw it into the DAW. But all the drum sounds pretty much come from these keyboards, and highly, you can manipulate, once you get a drum sound going, you can manipulate it and
Sure.
go to town on it digitally once it's in there. But
So talk to me about the performance of the drums into your DAW. Are you mashing keys? Are you setting up a step sequencer, or do you have some pads that trigger or something like that?
yeah. So I have like a drum bank that I kind of customized with my favorite drum sounds. And what I'll do is I'll come up with the sections of the drumming or just the full part, and I'll just hit record and it'll just throw everything in there like a single performance, that I can mix like track by track.
Sure.
But I kind of think of the drumming as like a singular kind of performance because I am a drummer. So I think of like fills and transitions, and some of my songs are just like a steady loop the whole time. But a lot of times I'll throw fills in, and when you're a drummer, you think kind of there's this compartmentalized way of thinking about the music, from a drummer's perspective. And so, I think of the drum parts that I compose probably from a drummer's perspective.
Well, because you can obviously sequence or record things that are impossible for a drummer to play because you only have 2 hands and 2 feet. But and so what I'm hearing you say is you make sure that it's realistic for somebody to play sitting down at a set.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm just curious. I feel like I saw in some of your YouTube channel that maybe you had sat down at one of those Roland pad trigger sets somewhere, and I wasn't sure if that's how you get it in or if you use it just mashing keys on the keyboard.
Well, it's basically like different approaches. So like I've definitely sat on those. I have like a Roland pad kit over here, and I can plug that into MIDI and just record a performance.
Yeah.
But then it's a matter of getting those blocks to line up with the right blocks in my keyboard. Right. So sometimes that's just a scratch track or an idea thing.
Yeah.
But basically I'm just arranging all the MIDI like blocks to where I want them to go, and then just recording each thing one at a time or just together on separate tracks. So that's kind of the gist of it.
You have just a regular drum kit?
I do. They're all sitting in cases.
I was going to say analog drum kit, but
right there, there's a MIDI controller. But yeah, no, I have a couple drum kits, but I live in an apartment, so they're not set up. But if I gig, I'll need to have real drums usually. If I get a drum gig,
the day before you move out, go to town.
That's right.
Yes, I will do that.
Have a gig in your apartment.
There you go. Invite the neighbors. No, I was asking about that. I mean, I know I've seen you play them, so I didn't know if that was something through work or your own. I have my own kit, and I had created a sample kit on an ASR10 sampler just so I could use my drums in a sequence setting through a DAW a little simpler. And, it gave it a kind of a hybrid feel because it was very quantized, but natural sounds. And if you get enough samples and you build that within your sampler, you can add nuance through velocity or some other kind of MIDI input. So I was just curious if you'd ever done any or you've thought about that.
I've always fantasized about the idea of just like sampling real drums and then just creating like a more electronic type of beat or something like from those organic sounds, but I've yet to actually follow through on that concept. But yeah, I've always thought about doing that since I was a pretty young drummer. I always thought that'd be a cool idea.
That is a cool idea.
Yeah. Do it at work.
I think DJ Shadow was kind of the impetus of that, because that's what he was kind of doing back in the 90s. He was like programming all these like analog sounds.
A guy we talked to, I don't know, a couple interviews back, he's sequencing stuff, but he's doing live guitar and live bass. And we were talking to him because the drums, he had a couple albums, and I'm like, the drums sound consistent, and it just feels, and to me, like a real drummer. And so I asked him about it, and I said, no, those are 100% sequenced. I'm just going, mind blown. And I think he was using something called, was it Crow Drummer?
It's a plugin.
I don't remember. It was a plugin.
Yeah.
And you can, create your own kits and this and that, but it was enough to make me question it, which I was like, oh, this is very impressive. But it'd be cool if you could sample your own kit and then utilize that plugin and all the advantages that gave you, that would be pretty neat. So that's something I'm going to be looking at, because yeah, I did this kit thing, I don't know, 20 years ago or more, and the way to do it on the SR10, it was clunky. You know, it's a hardware clicking buttons on a little 2-line screen interface, and yes, you could do nuance. You could do 128 levels of nuance on every quote sampled instrument if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But to do that without having waveforms and the visualization and things like that would just be annoying. But it'd be really cool to have some interface that was very helpful, where it's like, hey, play, just hit your snare drum repeatedly from as soft as you can till as loud as you can, and I'm going to parse these out and make this a nuanced thing. And because that was what was that was a goal of mine. It wasn't what was missing from what I did. What I did was to what you were speaking about, of having organic sounds, but in a very robotic, quantized manner. And it gave it like a weird personality, which was great for some things. But then the dream was to have my drum kit inside the computer, programmable in a way that I could, or in some instances could never play it.
Yeah. I think that's where the plugin comes into the picture now, because it's like basically sounds like real drums. So kind of it's a little discouraging for us real drummers out there, but in a way I didn't want those gigs anyways.
But you got the Roland kit, so you could input stuff and then tweak it. So
yeah, I've been messing around with that too lately, like on this current song I was working on, like just trying to get some more organic sounding fills that sound like like a real drummer might play, not just like some programmed fill, but whatever that means. But yeah, you kind of like just recording scratch tracks of you playing electronic drums and then putting that into a song. Yeah, it definitely feels like a more organic approach to recording drum patterns, as opposed to just like boop boop bop boop.
This is reminding me of an idea I had a million years ago. And to preface it with, one of the ways that I had learned piano, one of the ways I learned the Entertainer is that the piano that we had was a player piano that had the old roll that, you pump the feet and it would mash down the keys.
Wow.
Well, fast forward to when MIDI was invented, and then a little bit past that, really fancy places and certain fancy hotels, they would have these grand pianos or baby grand pianos, and a little thing with a diskette that maybe they had 8 songs, but it was MIDI, and it was actually telling a real piano where to mash down what keys, but with like solenoids, right? So instead of air pumps or whatever. And I got to thinking, hang on a minute, that's pretty cool. So I could record something MIDI-wise, sequence it, plug it into this piano in a studio, and then I could play with mic techniques all day long and have the perfect performance every time, because MIDI was telling this real piano what to do. And then my brain went, but what about a drum set? And I have since then seen people build little robot hands that are MIDI triggerable. And so the idea being that you set up your drum set in a room in a studio and you mic it, and then you program it in your sequencer, and then you can play all day with every single thing that you've ever wanted to try out with how do I get my drums to sound amazing, but you get a great performance every time.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I've seen a robotic drum set at least once in my life. It was a long time ago, but that's a wild idea, the player drum set. Cool.
Yeah, I mean it's not a new one, because right, there are those really, really old turn of the century full band things that, everything would be triggered in some way or another, but it's just the idea that, well, let's hook it up to a DAW and see what we can do.
Yeah.
The mechanical beasts.
Well, also, don't forget Chuck E. Cheese.
Yes. Yeah.
The animatronic stage show there.
Yes. Not creepy at all.
I just finally had that out of my head. forever. We kind of touched on it, but what's the missing piece between Reaper and how you have this all set up? You've got a MIDI input and all your things are linked through that?
Just a Focusrite, yeah.
Okay.
Just like a small one, yeah. And
so in, out, and through? Going,
yeah.
Everything's linked up and you're calling it out? Okay.
Is that Focusrite your analog audio I/O as well as your MIDI interface?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like 4 ins and outs and then the MIDI connection. So that's pretty much it. I mean, it's pretty bare bones. Yeah, it works, and I have to do a lot of connecting and disconnecting, but I'm used to it now. It's not a big deal. It's like you're saying, like once you get used to the technical stuff, it kind of you just don't think about it as much.
So is this the 4i4, the red thing?
Yep, that's
okay.
the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I pulled it up. I'm having a look at it.
Good investment. And
the connecting and disconnecting is, I think that grounds you more to it, to the process, just being in the moment of this is where this sound goes in and out, and I'm only doing this, and so it's going to be clean from this synthesizer only to here.
That's true.
I don't have to worry about, are these things up on a mixer or whatever. Because I know in the grand scheme of things, you wish for things like, I need a 16 input or 24 input mix, 48 inputs, and they'll all be live all the time. But I will tell you from experience, you're just inviting headaches.
Noise and stuff.
Who knows? Because when you have the ability to patch 64 channels to 64 inputs all digitally, they're always wrong. So you have half your time is just dealing with all of that. And yes, you can make presets, and yes, you can do this and that. But there's something very nice about this just works. And the fact that I think, isn't that one bus powered?
Yes.
And so it's just one cable, and you and a computer and a cable and that thing, and that's it.
Yeah, I actually have it set up right now to do this mic. So
there's some beauty in that. So I applaud you and your choice. It was a good one.
No, I was going to ask you about your mic.
Oh,
Is that an AKG? What is that?
Gosh, I don't even remember. It's Audio Technica.
Okay.
And then AT2020.
Nice.
Yeah. Is it good?
Sounds fine.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the little brother to a million years ago, they made the AT4050, 4050, one of those. And then they made the other one, which is the 4040 or 4050. And they were kind of like, hey, here's our step into the big dynamic, large diaphragm condenser mics. And then they were great. When we went to purchase those, we were looking at a Neumann. The one that I'm talking through right now is a TLM 103. We were either going to buy this or the 4050, I think it's, or 4030. It's one of those. And we were A-Bing them, and we were like, just for the money, for right now, let's get the Audio Technica, because it sounds just, we can't hear the difference.
Yeah,
and
99% is good for 50% less.
Many, many years later, when I was foolish and had a lot more money, I bought one of these, and I still can't tell you. I go back and forth between them, and sometimes I use this, and sometimes I use the other one, and I don't know if it's in my head that I like these a little bit more, but some days I like the Audio Technica a little more, and I can't tell you why. They both sound amazing. Just like yours sounds amazing.
Thanks. Yeah, I just picked it up a few years ago, and I kind of pull it out occasionally. I've been trying to experiment with recording some vocal tracks with it. I don't know if that's what you're supposed to do, like it's the right kind of mic or not, but
sure.
Give it a whirl,
If it sounds good, it's the right kind of mic.
Yeah, exactly. I remember hearing from an engineer a long time ago about the idea of like, well, should I be recording with a U87 in a vocal booth or whatever? And he's like, it doesn't matter what you record with. If the performance is terrible, you can't fix that. And now these days you can do a little bit to it, but if you can nail the performance, and they're just doing it through an SM57 or a 58, and you're in a closet full of clothes, that's really all you need these days, is a mic that can capture it and kind of a quiet place. But if they can nail the performance, that's the important thing. So if they feel comfortable with something that they've been using in their garage, and they feel intimidated with this giant tube mic in front of them, and I think a lot of it is mostly psychology, right? So
yeah. Well, I do have a Shure 58. I could whip that out too.
And those things, you can use them as a hammer whenever you need to, and then you can plug them right back in and use them as a mic, and they are awesome.
Bulletproof.
SM58 sounds really great for 95, maybe even 99% of the things you put in front of it. I could, for proof of concept, one of these days, I should record an entire album with nothing but Shure SM58s, just to show the world that you don't need any other mic. It's the one.
Let's go.
You can buy some Shure stock before that happens.
Yes.
Sounds like a fun vanity project.
Well, they have really good low-end response, and their high-end response is okay. And I'd say most everything you could mic with that thing, and you could get away with it.
So that kind of brings me to the next step of all this. What are you mixing on? Are you just, using cans, or you got some monitors there? Or?
I have some monitors. I've got I think they're PreSonus 8-inch monitors, and like a little subwoofer that I barely use, but it's there.
Perfect.
But yeah, they're pretty like low budget again. And I just bought some new headphones. They're like Beyer Dynamic headphones that I'm going to use them to mix the next stuff, but I haven't really used them much. So
you just made Mike Dow very happy.
Yeah, did I? Yeah, I forget the actual like.
They're going to be the exact ones you.
They're going to be DT 150s or 170s.
Let's see.
Oh no.
990 Pro.
Ooh, fancy.
Look at that.
I don't know that.
Velvety
fabric.
cushion.
Yeah.
Yes, I can show you the
no
old,
black ear dandruff for you.
Yeah, that's right. That's they kind of figured it
folks.
out. Your ears will never know what hit them.
Yeah, I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah, it's supposed
So
to be
anyway,
part,
those are coming up
learning.
for the next session, but yeah, I just haven't had these like studio monitors back here. They're pretty good. I mean, I've heard amazing music come out of them that wasn't mine, so I know that what they're capable of.
And that's the thing that's great about this stuff is when you get gear that sounds good, it kind of makes you want to keep doing things with it, right? You listen to some of your favorite songs through it, and you're like, oh, I'm hearing things I've never heard before, and I really like this. And then you start making music through them, and you're like, oh, I'm hearing things I've never heard before that I'm making, and I want to keep making it. So it's nice to have good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's like not even that good. It's just kind of like better than garbage. So we'll just go with that for now. But yeah, you can kind of see the studio monitors are back there.
I mean,
okay.
Yeah, I guess I was talking more about the Beyer Dynamics, but the studio monitors are good too. PreSonus does got good stuff. Yes.
Yeah, those headphones they look nice. I can't wait to use them.
Yeah, I think if you have good contrast, that helps too, because when you get into a heavy mixing session, you'll get ear fatigue. And to just have that contrast, you're like, oh, I'm now hearing something which I wasn't hearing. And then you can fix it there. And then you go back to the other headphones or monitors and you go, oh, now I actually notice it. So it's good to have. And then clearly, print something to USB or burn a CD and put it in your car and go, oh, wow, this bass is not happening or whatever it may be. So that's cool.
And do you find yourself going through that process where you mix something, you play it back and at a friend's house and in your car.
Most definitely. Yeah, like I'll listen to it in earbuds and I'll take it to work and throw it on some powered speakers just to hear what that would sound like.
You probably have access to a real live honest to God studio setup at work somewhere, right?
More or less. I mean, it's not like top of the line, but it's pretty functional, and there's some decent powered speakers there. You can just listen through stuff that you're like used to hearing things on anyways, so you can kind of see what's working.
But you bring up a very good point that I don't think we've ever discussed in the show yet or on this podcast is earbuds. That mixing for those is a whole different beast. That the generation today is only listening on those, and they could care less about a home stereo system. And the idea that a lot of things are going to be super antiseptic through that, and ear fatigue in them for the in listener, right? Like, because eventually at some point they're going to be like, I'm done, and it may be your album that's causing that. But the idea that they can also cancel out what's coming in, and they can hear everything.
True. And you can also do a mix for like just your phone, like just playing on your phone speaker.
Right.
See what that sounds like, because I've listened to stuff just out of that speaker a lot too, so I kind of get what works there. And your iPad, whatever, your Alexa.
That's
thing.
right.
I don't have one, but everyone else does, so you can go play one. What do they call those dots?
Yes. Yep.
I thought when you were born in Seattle, they just gave you one with a birth certificate.
It's part of it.
Yeah, I'm still waiting, but
It's like Alaska with the oil check. Like, here's your dot.
Everyone else has one, so it's fine. But yeah, just like playing, like testing out mixes on those like kind of crappy speakers is probably an important part of the process now.
Yes. I've done that for that reason, but I've also, if I need inspiration in a song, like I'm like, man, I need some new part, whatever. I've found this serendipitously one day where I was mixing on Sony Sports. Remember those?
Oh yeah.
Basically earbuds, but the yellow fold-up kind. And I went to the bathroom, and they were just sitting there on the keyboard, and in the next room, I hear this tinny kind of melody thing, and I'm like, what the hell is that? So I got this part in my head, and I was like, put the headphones back on, and I'm like, oh no, this is just there. It just because of the frequencies that were coming out, I heard something as a single part that wasn't actually in the song, and I was able to brew something up. So that got put into my little box of tricks of, hey, listen to this. Because basically when you do that, it's essentially an EQ and a comb filter to some degree and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, you could do it that way too, but I thought that was pretty neat.
That's a cool tool to have in your back pocket. What other things do we need to cover real quick, Nimocks?
Well, if we're going to wrap it up, I want to ask, I mean, we kind of touched on this, but where are you going from here? What's next in your conscious mind as far as Eric and music and Dream Commander or others?
The agenda has always kind of been the same ever since the beginning, just making music, getting it out there, performing it, and just rinsing, repeating, and just trying to grow as an artist, grow as a musician, and see what happens, just see where the journey takes me. I don't really have any expectations. It's just all about, for me, it's all about the music and the process and just doing it. And once it's done, trying to do it again, hopefully, if I'm fortunate enough to be able to. And on whatever level that means, it could be, just like a DIY level or something more than that. It just, whatever I'm fortunate enough to be able to do is kind of good enough for me, I'd say. Teaching is huge. I love teaching. I want to keep doing that and just try to be involved in as much music as I can without overextending myself,
I have a feeling you will, based on what I've heard, and I like it. And I'm actually really looking forward to some new tracks that add, vocal elements and or lyrics, and see what that's
Thank
like.
you. Yeah, I'm really excited about doing that, and I definitely have ideas that are in the works. They're just not quite finished, but yeah, they're probably. If I don't end up singing it, somebody will. I think so.
Craigslist.
Yes, and luckily
Craigslist.
my girlfriend is a vocalist, so maybe
Oh, well, that's
tap her for
handy.
a favor.
There you go.
Do you have any questions for us?
Actually, I don't, but I wanted to just thank you guys for having me on your podcast, and I thought it was a great experience and a great opportunity to talk to you guys and just share my story and get a little bit about your guys' story. And yeah, I'd love to do it again sometime.
We'd love to have you. This has been great. Thank you so much for your time.
I love learning about people and how their journeys have similarities and differences, and yours is very unique in the people that I've met and we've talked to, so that's cool.
Thanks.
You're our second educator. Last week we talked to a guy. The episode's not out yet, it's being edited. We knew him in high school, but he's a high school band director now, but he's mainly
Nice.
into percussion, but he knows everything, he has a music degree. Personally, I really like production and process and cables and gear and all that. I find all of it interesting. So, and from me teaching some people some stuff, you probably have the same experience where it helps you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's a selfish act in a way, but yeah, it's rewarding. So
Well, I don't think you getting something out of it means it's selfish. So
sure.
it's
Okay.
a two-way street. How's that?
I'll take that. Yeah. Well, thanks again, you guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Enjoy your day.
All right, you
see you.
too. Enjoy it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Mics on mics, yeah.